Are live and ready for the second match in the quarterfinals of the Jamaica Civil Service Association High Schools Debate Competition for 2025. So, ladies and gentlemen, we have two excellent teams who are going to be vying for one of a few remaining slots in the semi-finals of this competition. Earlier, we saw Wilmer's Boys School secure a definitive victory over Clarendon College. They have secured their first slot in the semi-finals of this competition. Now, hoping to join them are two other excellent debating institutions, Knox College and Campion College. I am Ravon Thomas Matthews, and it is an honor and privilege to be your chair and host for today. I'd like to take the opportunity to give a special thanks to the Jamaica Civil Service Association for bringing this competition back. You see, 2025, that is because this is a competition that was scheduled to have concluded during Civil Service Week, but due to one horrible Hurricane Melissa, the competition was postponed but not cancelled. And we want to thank the JCSA for bringing it back in 2026 so that these teams who have put in so much work can show the fruits of their labor. With that said, I'd like to introduce you to my panel of adjudicators, starting with Ms. Sunit Martin and followed by Mr. Javon Downey.
Hello, good morning, everyone. And as Ravon says, this is our second match of the quarterfinals of the JCSA High Schools Debate Competition. We once again are meeting Knox College in proposition this time and Campion College in opposition, and they're facing off with a very relevant motion, which reads, this house believes that remote work is a more effective tool at improving employee mental health than interventions at the workplace, such as mental health seminars, people first office designs, and wellness amenities. May the best team win.
Thank you very much, Sonique. And of course, my other judge will be joining us on the panel today, Mr. Javon Downey.
Hello, good morning, guys. It's afternoon for me. I'm in the UK. I take it a distinct pleasure to be here to adjudicate this match today, and I'm wishing all the best to both teams. And let's have an interesting debate. Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much, Javon Downey. Now, we want to hear from the teams. We ask them to now introduce themselves, starting with the team in proposition, Knox College.
Hello, my name is Sharon Smith. I'm first speaker.
Good morning. My name is Johnny Scott. I'm second speaker.
Good morning. My name is Summer Anderson. I'm the third speaker.
Thank you very much. Those are the speakers from Knox College. We now invite Campion College to introduce themselves.
Good morning. My name is Milan Sterling and I'm the first speaker.
Good morning. My name is Abraham Moore and I'm the second speaker.
Good morning. My name is Joshua Walcott and I'm the third speaker.
All right. Thank you very much. Now, ladies and gentlemen, the motion before us reads once more. This House believes that remote work is a more effective tool at improving employee mental health than interventions at the workplace. Quite an interesting and very topical motion. Questioning which one gives us better mental health outcomes? Is it remote work, the ability to work from at home or anywhere else you so desire? Or is it structured interventions in the workplace, such as mental health seminar, people first, office design, wellness amenities, the list goes on. I'm sure that these two teams, illustrious debating institutions as they are, have prepared for us wonderful cases. Of course, every debate is governed by a set of rules, and these rules are coming from the Jade parliamentary format, a unique format of debating. So, in this format, we see the first speakers debating for 7 minutes. The second speakers, they'll have 6 minutes, and the third and final speakers will have 5 minutes to present their case. Of note, the first and last minute of each speech is considered protected time. During that first and last minute, no points of information will be allowed, so the speakers are protected from points of information. Of course, during the reply speech, absolutely no points of information will be allowed at all. Now, between the first and second set of speakers and the second and third set of speakers, we have something really awesome for you, the viewing audience. We call it the cross-examination period. But don't worry, I'll tell you a little bit more about the cross-examination when we get to that stage in the debate. Now, ladies and gentlemen, you've heard enough from me. You want to hear from your debaters. And so, I officially call to order this second match in the quarterfinals of the JCSA debates at 2025. I invite the first speaker from Knox College to take the stage. Sharian Smith, the floor is yours.
Okay, are you able to hear me?
You can go
Yes?
right ahead, Sharian.
Okay, starting in 3, 2, 1. Mr. Speaker, the clash in this debate is whether we improve employee mental health by removing the causes of workplace stress or by asking workers to cope with that stress through seminars, wellness apps, and office amenities. Our side believes mental health improves when you remove structural stressors from people's daily lives. The position's model leaves those stressors in place and merely attempts to manage them after the damage has already occurred, which fails to address how mental health is actually maintained. We're telling you that mental health refers to an individual's long-term psychological stability, and it depends primarily on 3 conditions. Firstly, how much chronic stress a person experiences. 2, how much time they have to recover from that stress. And 3, how much control they have over their daily environment. Mental health deteriorates when individuals face repeated stressors without relief. This is why institutions like the World Health Organization define burnout as the result of chronic workplace stress that has not been successfully managed. Psychological stability requires recovery time, like rest, family interaction, and leisure, which allows individuals to regulate stress hormones and restore mental energy. Finally, mental health depends on perceived control over one's environment. Decades of psychological research show that stress increases when individuals feel that they lack control over their schedules, tasks, or surroundings, and this will become increasingly relevant as we proceed. Mr. Speaker, workplace interventions do not improve any of these issues at the root, and that's actually more harmful for workers in the long run. Workplace interventions are structurally limited in what they can achieve because they are designed to operate within the existing structure of office work rather than changing it. In practice, this means that the most common interventions available to employers are things like mental health seminars, counseling services, wellness apps, meditation sessions, or redesigned office amenities such as relaxation rooms and gyms. These tools are designed to help employees cope with stress, not to remove the conditions that produce that stress in the first place. The reason for this is practical. Employers face legal, logistical, and organizational constraints that make structural reform far more difficult than implementing wellness programs. Companies cannot easily eliminate commuting requirements. They cannot easily abandon fixed schedules that coordinate teams, meetings, and supervision, nor can they easily redesign into work systems around individual needs. As a result, the interventions opposition rely on tend to be add-ons to existing structure of work rather than changes to the structure itself. This becomes contentious for the opposition for 2 reasons. Firstly, if these interventions remain small-scale programs, such as seminars or wellness initiatives, then they fail to address the 3 core drivers of mental health we have already identified. A meditation seminar cannot give workers back the hours they lose commuting every day, and a wellness room cannot repair exhaustion caused by rigid schedules. Secondly, if the opposition claims that their interventions fundamentally change these things, then they are no longer defending workplace interventions. They are defending structural workplace reform, which brings their model much closer to our own. So the opposition faces a dilemma. Either their interventions remain superficial, in which case they fail to improve mental health to the same extent that we manage because they leave the causes of stress unchanged, they become structural reforms, in which case they concede to our principle that mental health improves when the sources of stress are removed rather than managed. This transitions us to our first substantive point. Remote work restores time, which is an important resource for mental health. Time determines whether workers can sleep adequately, maintain relationships, exercise, and decompress from work. When workers lose several hours each day to commuting and rigid schedules, the time required for recovery simply disappears. Usually, opposition cannot restore this time because their interventions operate after the workday has already been structured around commuting and fixed schedule. Remote work restores this time in three ways. First, it eliminates commuting. In Jamaica, many employees travel long distances between areas such as Mandeville and Kingston because well-paying jobs are concentrated in urban centers where many workers do not live. As a result, workers often spend several hours each day in traffic or waiting on transportation. When remote work removes commuting, workers immediately recover hours each week that can instead be used for sleep, exercise, or family interaction. Opposition cannot replicate this benefit. A meditation seminar cannot give workers back hours spent in traffic, and a wellness room cannot reduce the exhaustion created by daily commuting. These tools attempt to manage stress after it occurs rather than eliminating its cause. This matters because commuting happens every single day, while workplace interventions occur only occasionally. Opposition may argue that this time will simply be replaced by domestic responsibilities, but even if some of that time is used for household tasks, workers still benefit because they are no longer losing hours every day to commuting. Remote work restores flexibility over how time is used, while opposition's model restores no time at all. Secondly, remote work allows workers to align their schedules with their natural productivity cycles. Human productivity does not naturally follow a rigid 9-to-5 schedule. Remote work allows employees to organize work around when they function best, reducing stress caused by rigid schedules. Office environments cannot easily provide this flexibility because meetings, supervision, and coordination require synchronized schedules. Thirdly, remote work restores recovery times throughout the day. Workers can step away from screens or take short breaks when stress actually arises. These recovery opportunities are far more effective than occasional wellness sessions because they occur in real time rather than after stress has accumulated. Structural changes affect workers every day, while seminars or wellness programs occur only occasionally. Taken together, the difference is structural. Remote work removes the stressors themselves, while opposition merely asks workers to cope with their consequences. Our second mechanism, Mr. Speaker, is control over the work environment. Psychological research consistently shows that stress intensifies when individuals feel trapped in conditions they cannot influence. When traditional office environments impose uniform conditions on all employees, workers must follow fixed schedules operated in shared spaces filled with interruptions and work environments that they cannot modify. Remote work restores control over when, where, and how work is done. Employees can structure their workspace, regulate lighting and noise, and determine the pace at which they complete tasks. This reduces stress because individuals can adjust their environment to match their cognitive emotional needs rather than forcing themselves to endure unsustainable conditions. Importantly, this control also makes recovery more effective. When individuals have autonomy over the time, they can choose forms of rest or leisure that actually works for them. Ultimately, remote work improves all three conditions required for mental health. It reduces chronic stress, restores time for recovery, and gives workers meaningful control
And
over
that
their environment.
is
Positions
time.
intervention improve
That
none of these
is
conditions.
time. Thank you very much. That was the first speaker from Team Knox College, Shari and Smith. Thank you very much for opening this debate. We now invite the first speaker from Campion College, Abraham Waugh, to present their case. Actually, my apologies. The first speaker from Campion College is Milan Sterling. The floor is yours, Milan.
We face a mental health crisis in the modern workplace that demands our urgent attention. And every corporate brochure tells us about flexible work arrangements and work from home options. Yet, after all that flexibility, our employees are more isolated than ever. Young professionals record loneliness, and our homes have become offices we cannot escape. The Prime Minister has told us that sending workers home is a solution to this, and that is absurd. This debate is about which approach actually delivers better mental health outcomes, not which looks better on our website. Firstly, let us be clear about what this motion actually asks. It asks us to compare two tools. Remote work, which refers to employee arrangements where employees work primarily from locations outside of traditional office spaces, often from home. The proposition has downplayed the definition of workplace interventions. They are targeted, active investments into the mental health of employees through seminars, people-first office designs, and wellness amenities. Firstly, the speaker brings up time and time again of the issue of commuting. We concede that commutes have negative aspects, but they prevent a much worse outcome. As my second speaker will further dive into, commuting allows a space where people can switch from work to home. The first speaker also mentions the issue of anxiety and depression. However, mental health is not just limited to anxiety and depression. It can be caused by loss of family members, and other dejected experiences. The proposition case rests on the idea that simply removing workers from the office is more effective than directly treating the causes of poor mental health. We say that is not a solution, it is an escape. The question I'll be answering is not which tool produces better mental health outcomes across both serious conditions like anxiety and depression and general conditions like burnout and chronic stress. It is why workplace interventions is the answer to that question. Humans require face-to-face interaction for psychological well-being. When we interact in person, our brains engage in social buffering. Microexpressions, tone, and physical presence trigger oxytocin and reduce cortisol. This neural regulation is largely absent digitally.
Point of information.
Journal not accepted. A 2025 Journal Affective Disorder study of 87,000 US adults found remote workers 3 to 4 days weekly had 16% higher odds of loneliness. Government reports documented staff breakdowns directly related to isolation. Loneliness is one of the strongest predictors of depression, anxiety, and deteriorating mental health.
Point of information.
Not accepted. For those prone to anxiety or depression, isolation removes daily checks that prevent bad days from becoming crises. I will accept.
Okay, so having a community in your workforce is statistically understood that kind of engagement is at a lower quality because it's forced interaction and not because you have genuine likes and similar politics, for example, or any genuine connection that isn't forced proximity.
So during these interventions, there will be activities put in place for workers to develop connections with their other co-workers in a safe space rather than remote work where you may say have family and friends to interact with at home, but that creates a blurred work-life separation, allowing someone to not People First Office Designs builds protective bonds, allowing socialization that is critical to well-being. People First Design incorporates roundtables encouraging conversation, breakout areas fostering engagement, and quiet zones for decompression. When CTEC resigned its Britos office with roundtables and sofa seating, employees reported feeling more relaxed and engaged. Steelcase research found that People First environments yield 28% higher well-being scores and 32% higher engagement. Mental health seminars do not just teach coping strategies, they create a safe space and shared vulnerability. When a colleague knows you are struggling, you are less alone. And when a manager has been trained to recognize the stress, you feel seen. In cases where an individual may be experiencing adversities like divorce or the loss of a family member, a healthy relationship between manager and employees allows for open dialogue that enables managers to temporarily adjust workloads or deadlines, preventing employees from becoming incapacitated. When people with more serious mental illnesses like anxiety and depression find it hard to reach out and form bonds because they're secluded from their other employees. A study of the National Library of Medicine states people with depression have long-term goals and aspirations to reconnect with others. Remote work just does not facilitate this. Socializing is vital to mental health because it reduces stress, alleviates anxiety and depression, and fosters a sense of belonging. Research indicates that social support is linked to a 63% lower risk of depression and a 52% lower risk of poor sleep quality among those who perceive a high level of social support compared to those who perceive a low support. Therefore, fostering social connections can create a positive feedback loop that enhances well-being for all involved. Mental health seminars reduce stigma and build community. Professionally facilitated seminars create a safe spaces where employees learn active listening and become attuned to each other's struggles. Mental health seminars do something profound. They sensitize managers. A manager who has undergone mental health training learns to recalibrate. They adjust to workloads. They change the way they give feedback. They create an environment where an employee can say, I am struggling without fearing for their job. That is direct structural change. Where stigma is high, Scammer Start the Conversation program led to a trained assistant superintendent helping a missing crisis. The worker got help and returned grateful. Now consider what remote work does to the manager-employee relationship. When workers are not physically present, managers cannot observe effort, only output. This creates a fundamental problem of information asymmetry. The natural managerial response, especially in performance-driven organizations, is micromanagement, like surveillance software and consistent check-ins. Workers feel watched, not trusted. They feel more vulnerable to arbitrary performance reviews and potential layoffs because of the fog of remote work makes it harder to demonstrate their value. The proposition cannot claim the idealized version of remote work where every manager is trusting and every home is a peaceful sanctuary. Look to the clouds and know that in the real world, remote work creates conditions that worsen anxiety. In the real world, workplace interventions work because they are targeted, active, and improve over time. Under proposition, physical separation is an active risk factor. Government reviews identify isolation as a key psychosocial risk. Employees report fewer friendships, less ability to read emotional states, no one noticing when they withdraw. Workplace, the proposition tools send workers home and strips them of community.
All right. That was an explosive start to the debate from both teams. Now, at this point in time, we're going to ignite the fireworks just a little bit more with that cross-examination period I was telling you about. And so, for this period of the Jade parliamentary format, how it works is that team opposition is going to pose 3 questions to team proposition. Each question can last no more than 10 seconds, and each answer will last no more than 45 seconds. It's important to note that for the team asking the questions, only one person may do so. However, for the team that is answering the question, the entire team may answer it. All right? After opposition has posed their 3 questions to proposition and they've been answered, we'll invite proposition to pose their 3 questions to opposition. And so, ladies and gentlemen, with all that said, we invite the first question to be posed by Team Opposition Campion College.
Over 2/3 of workers report being unable to unplug from work. How would you deal with employees who are unable to unplug under your side?
I'm sorry, repeat, please.
2/3 of workers report being unable to unplug with remote work. How would you deal with employees who are unable to unplug under your side?
The thing is, this exists under your side with like greater prevalence because although these individuals might have like an issue unplugging from their work, just like a minor degree, by the way, because they do still have more time to then spend on leisurely activities because they have like time reduced from commuting and more like flexibility with their work and like with their work being at home. Additionally, they under your side, however, being stuck in the environment of the workforce, they don't have that time to detract from their work, especially if they're stressed or like overwhelmed. Rather, what they have to do, they have to like seek the amenities provided in the workplace, which aren't always suited for their particular issues or their particular needs, which is something that they can actually seek for themselves with their autonomy if they have remote access to like remote working environments.
So, all right. Do you concede that people under your side are more prone to using negative coping mechanisms like day drinking to cope with work-related stress?
The irony is that's actually an issue that you have to contend within the status quo, or for people who have overwhelmed, like rigid or uneven work-life balances, which is like the case for traditional working systems, because the work there tends to be overwhelming. It's like in your face. You have to contend with it for hours on end, and frequently this work spills over into like your day-to-day after you have exited from your physical location, and that then leads to these people being more overwhelmed, especially when you consider the fact that, as we'll explain later, they don't actually have proper support groups to like help them contend with these things. So they have to default for, like, to other means, or they don't have the time under your side to like find other means of like leisure or enjoyment, something we've explained that we actually do. So they have to use maladaptive methods of coping because there's nothing else they have time for besides like sporadically drinking.
Do you concede that when managers are more informed about mental health issues, it reduces the stress experienced by workers? If not, why?
I didn't hear the first part of your question. Can you please repeat?
Do you concede that when managers are more informed about mental health issues, it reduces the stress experienced by workers? If not, why?
We're actually going to tell you that it's far more likely that whether or not these people communicate with these managers about their mental health issues, it's still a fact that under our side, they have access to a higher quality methods of contending with these issues themselves. People do know what their issues are. People do know how to solve these issues generally. The issue is that like being like a 9-to-5 workspace where they actually have to physically be in the space kind of limits their ability to address these in like ways that work best for them. So for example, if you know that you need to rest in between work, that's not something that you're going to be like allowed to do because work is stringent, it's rigid, and it allows for workers to do only things like a certain degree of like alleviate or of to like a certain degree. And after that point, if like that worker had like specific needs like neurodivergent individuals that cannot be fulfilled by the broad scale application of like these workplace interventions, but that person would know what would work for them. So whether or not a manager is available, they would be better equipped to address this if they have like access to like the freedom and flexibility that's associated with like remote working.
Right, thank you very much. We now invite Team Knox College to pose their questions to Team Campion.
Okay, so I'm sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, you can go ahead.
Okay, so you brought up the issue of isolation being stronger on our side, but wouldn't that be the case for you if these people don't have the time to invest in like support groups outside of the workforce, so they have to default to that as their main means of like socialization, even if it doesn't actually suit their personality or their emotional needs?
Wait, can you repeat that question, please?
For the point of isolation, don't you guys actually have like higher levels of isolationism on your side because people don't have access to like other means of support groups, so they have to default to like the workplace and like the people there to like satisfy like their emotional needs, even if those individuals aren't actually well suited for like their personality, their goals, or like the nuances of their emotional requirements?
Okay, we deal with this issue in two cases. We deal with it in the case of like people having serious mental health conditions, and we deal with it in like the more general case. In the case where people have more serious mental health conditions like depression and anxiety, those people don't have the actual means through which to like try to seek connection. So when they're in remote work, they're sort of locked off from the rest of society, and they don't have the motivation to actually seek out these connections due to their like chemical wiring. In the more general case, in the more like regular case where more people experience, we believe that like team building exercises, people being able to like socialize and branch out is how they're actually, and like positive reinforcement through that is how they're going to be satisfying their need for socializing, right? What we see is that most remote workers live alone. Most remote workers don't have the ability to like socialize outside of this. Yeah.
Okay, so with workplace intervention, how do you account for the fact that it is broadly applied? So like individuals who are like neurodivergent individuals, they would not be able to like utilize that to like the maximum when they have like the ability to like otherwise do it on their own time. Sorry,
Wait,
can you hear me?
no, you were muffled for the first part, and like we need to plug in the computer's like about to. Wait, no, after she plugs in. After she plugs in. Okay, can you repeat now?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm really concerned with the fact that workplace interventions are applied broadly, so individuals who are like neurodivergent would be like left out of your model without the ability to then like ratify this for themselves because they don't have the time under your like system.
Workplace intervention is very diverse, right? So if you're neurodivergent, if you're struggling from like sort of neurodivergency and this type of thing, you're going to be able to relate to other people in that workplace who suffer from those same conditions. Not only that, but a lot of the benefits that we talked about apply generally. So the main thing that you pointed out was stress. What we pointed out in our first speaker, second substantive, was that managerial relationships would be strengthened. So managers would accommodate, they would shift their schedules, they would allow for more time off, they would essentially be able to accommodate the sort of they would be able to stop like the typical stress that leads to the detrimental mental health conditions that you talked about. We also deal with it in like more severe cases where we're just obviously better, right? Because when you're sort of locked in on home, you're not able to like socialize with people. You're not able to get these new connections. We don't believe that neurodivergent people are worse on the worst side of the debate.
Okay, so we brought up the point of time. Under your side, you objectively have less time to do like many things, including like find non-maladaptive coping mechanisms when you are stressed or overwhelmed. So how is it that you provide an alternative for like the loss of time under your side?
Okay, what we think is going to happen under your side is that there's not going to be a separation of work and the rest of your life, right? So when there isn't the commute from home to work, generally what's going to happen, and like when you're more vulnerable to being laid off, because as we pointed out already, when you're in remote work, there's sort of this fog between what the managers see and what you're doing. So you feel like you have to constantly be on, constantly working, and we already supported this with statistics. So you're going to get more time, or you're going to be using that time to work. So you're never going to log off your work app because you're scared. You're going to be stressing out over assignments, and you're going to feel constantly burned out. What we pointed out on our side is that the commute allows space for you to actually transition from work to home.
All right. So the flames of what was a hot debate have ignited into a raging bonfire. Thank you, both teams, for keeping this debate alive. It has been good so far. Now, let's see what the rest of the team has to offer. And to do so, we invite the second speaker from Knox College, Janae Scott.
Are you able to hear me?
Loud and clear, Janae.
Okay. Mr. Speaker, in the opposition leader focuses heavily on social isolation. However, Mr. Speaker, the isolation is more prevalent on their side due to the lack of genuine relationships in the workplace and the forced nature of these relationships. They also fail to realize that remote work does not mean you are locked in your home continuously, but you have the ability to work from any area. Mr. Speaker, allow me to proceed with the protocols previously established. This piece will advance two central arguments. First, it will prove that remote work removes structural psychological harm that the opposition's office interventions cannot touch. And it will demonstrate that the proposition tackles the root economic drivers of mental distress, while the opposition offers surface-level coping mechanisms. Let us begin with caregivers. The opposition's world is not a lack of wellness programming. It is a chronic role conflict. Mother of two school-age children who works a standard 9 to 5. She leaves home before they wake up. She's seated at her desk when their school day ends, and she carries quietly through every meeting, every deadline, every performance review, filled with guilt and anxiety about who is picking them up, whether they ate, and whether something went wrong. That is not occasional stress, Mr. Speaker. That is permanent psychological conditioning produced entirely by the structure of compulsory office attendance. No meditation room resolves it because the meditation room does not pick up her children. The research is unambiguous on this. A longitudinal study published in Work and Stress found that 70% of employed caregivers suffer work-related problems due to their dual roles, not occasionally.
persistent feature of their working lives. The exact problem here is the chronic role conflict, the sustained cognitive and emotional burden of managing caregiving responsibilities while being physically locked into a system that treats presence as productivity. Bottleneck is not the employee's mindset or resilience, it is compulsory physical attendance itself. As long as the structure demands that a worker's value is measured by their seat in an office, work and caregiving are placed in direct competition. That competition does not pause for a wellness seminar. The opposition never resolves that competition. They furnish it. They make the case more comfortable and call it reform. Remote work resolves that bottleneck at the structural level. The evidence confirms this directly. Review published in PMC found that employees working from home reported lower workplace exhaustion and that work from home arrangements, when experienced on their own terms, were generally associated with a positive impact on work-life balance precisely because they allow employees to synchronize working hours with family responsibilities, decreasing time-based conflicts. This is not merely theoretical or confined to international data. We see this principle operating in Jamaica itself. The JMB group, known for its culture of love, also embraced remote and flexible arrangements. JMB integrated remote work with traditional interventions such as confidential counseling services and a wellness portal. Interestingly, JMB also implemented a gradual reintegration program policy for new mothers, allowing them to increase their workday by 1 hour each month until the child is 6 months old. This combination of remote flexibility and targeted support addresses the specific mental health needs of working parents in Jamaica. Consider what the opposition's model produces in practice. Parents still leave before their child wakes. They still sit in traffic. They still receive a call from the school about a fever while pretending to be present in a meeting. They arrive home depleted, but they have access to an snack bar and a Tuesday afternoon breathing exercise. Not a mental health intervention, and is a static compensation for a structural problem the opposition has chosen not to solve. Remote work, by contrast, reduces exposure to the stressor itself. Parents in our model attend the school recital, handles the unexpected without panic, and returns to their desk without having sacrificed their professional standing to do so. A marginal improvement, Mr. Speaker. That is a shift from coping with chronic stress to eliminating its primary source. The impact is this: we're speaking about parents and caregivers, a group according to the National Alliance for Caregiving, just 1 in 5 full-time employees who handle both job and caregiving responsibilities simultaneously. So, as a model, these individuals remain locked in chronic stress cycles. Given tools to self-soothe within an unchanged structure, in hours, they experience measurable reductions in role conflicts, lower long-term burnout risk, greater psychological stability at home. The effect does not stop at the individual. It extends into the family units, into school readiness, into generational well-being. New to our second argument, the opposition speaks extensively about wellness programming. What they do not speak about is the invoice that employees receive simply for showing up. Mr. Speaker, chronic economic anxiety is the sustained psychological waste of recurring unavoidable costs produced directly by the requirement to be physically present at an office. Where petrol, parking, and the daily cost of lunch do not represent minor inconveniences. They represent structured financial extraction from employees who are already navigating rising cost of living. And that extraction has a measurable psychological consequence. Mr. Speaker, let us put hard numbers to this. An employee commuting 5 days a week in Kingston, Jamaica, spending on average 3,000 Jamaican dollars daily on fuel and 1,500 Jamaican dollars on lunch is losing approximately 22,500 Jamaican dollars weekly, over 90,000 Jamaican dollars per month, simply to satisfy the administrative requirements of physical presence. That figure excludes parking, professional attire, upkeep, and the premium paid on convenience meals purchased because there is no time to cook. Now multiply that across a workforce of hundreds. The opposition is not managing a wellness program, Mr. Speaker. They are presiding over a financial hemorrhage and handing out plasters. The remote worker by contrast cooks at home. They control their ingredients, and that dietary autonomy produces real biochemical mental health benefits, not as a perk, as a compounding daily outcome. What the opposition cannot resolve is compulsory physical attendance. Enumerated above exists solely because employees must be somewhere specific. Remote work removes that requirement, and the costs do not reduce, they collapse. No commute, no petrol spend, no overpriced lunch, no parking fee. What was financial leakage becomes financial retention. Retained income is not merely comfort, it is clinical relief. Research from the Money and Mental Health Policy Institute found that 86% of people managing both mental health difficulties and debts report that their debt actively worsens their mental health, self-reinforcing cycle of economic and psychological deterioration that no office seminar can interrupt, because no office seminar puts money back in anyone's pocket. Remote work does. Mr. Speaker,
Ultimately, the proposition's model is performative wellness within an unchanged system. The proposition's model restructures daily life to reduce chronic stress exposure. Mental health is improved not when employees are taught to breathe through pressure, but when the pressure itself is removed. For these reasons, Mr. Speaker, remote work is not simply more comfortable, it is structurally superior, demonstratively more effective, and the only intervention in this
And
debate that addresses
that
the root causes of
is
psychological
time.
distress rather than
Thank
temporary.
you very much, Janae. That was the second speaker, rather, from Team Knox College. At this point in time, we invite the second speaker from the team in opposition, Campion College, that speaker being Abraham Waugh.
Can I hear you?
Loud and clear, Abraham.
Mr. Speaker, my role today is to further oppose the motion, rebut the points of the proposition thus far, and add new substantive arguments to our case. Today, I will deepen our case through two major extensions. First, that workplace interventions provide structured, professional, and equitable mental health support, something remote work simply cannot guarantee. And second, that workplace interventions preserve the psychological boundary between work and home, preventing burnout and the dangerous always-on mentality. Before I continue, I must first refute the arguments of the proposition thus far. The first speaker champions this idea of extra time at home, but this is simply false. As we've said multiple times, remote work provides zero incentive to stop working. Managers know this. Managers see this extra time and see it as an opportunity to increase the workload, effectively negating this idea of more time for yourself and instead exacerbating the issue that you yourselves are pushing forward. Managers are not blind. When an opportunity presents itself to get more done, they take it. Now, I'll quickly get into my substantive arguments. The workplace interventions institutionalize mental health support. What do I mean by this? Workplace interventions are
Information.
not accepted. Workplace interventions are superior because they embed mental health support into the structure of employment. Remote work individualizes responsibility and assumes ideal home environments that do not exist for everyone. Mental health improves when there are intentional systems, not new locations. Remote work changes where you work. Workplace interventions change how you are supported. This is institutionalization versus individualization. In our world, employers invest in on-site counseling, employee assistance programs, mental health seminars, ergonomic workstations, just to name a few. When support is institutionalized, it becomes accessible. Under remote work, which is your world, the burden shifts entirely to the individual. If you're stressed, regulate it yourself. If you need therapy, organize it yourself. If you're lonely, fix it yourself. This assumes financial responsibility, stability, private space, discipline, and access to services, a privilege which many employers simply do not have. What this does is makes room for negative coping mechanisms to creep in with remote work, like day drink, as well as many other things, as we've said before. Workplace interventions guarantee a baseline standard for well-being. This universal approach simply makes it superior. Now, onto my second substantive. Workplace interventions preserve the boundary between work and home. They operate within a physically separate workplace, preserving the psychological boundary between work and home. Remote work erases that boundary and accelerates
Information.
That's fine. Why do I say this? The human brain relies on environmental cues to switch between mental states. When we physically leave work, our brains begin to disengage from work-related stress. When the environment changes, the role changes. Remote work collapses that separation, however. Your bedroom becomes your office. Your dining table becomes your desk. Your relaxation space becomes your productivity zone. When the environment does not change, the brain does not fully disengage. Proposition will try to also frame commute as wasted time, as they did earlier in their speeches. We simply disagree. The commute is transition time. When you leave the office building, walk to your car, sit on the bus, or walk to your front door, each step signals that work is ending. Now, we concede that excessively long commutes can harm your mental health. We concede. However, when the commute disappears entirely, so does transition. The main arguments normally come between long commutes and short commutes, not
Information.
no commutes whatsoever. That transition is diminished when you remove this factor as a whole. Now, let us example something simple as well, such as lunches. Through workplace interventions on our side of the world, lunch becomes a period to mentally reset. You leave your desk, you walk somewhere else, a cafeteria, a park, a restaurant. Your body moves, your environment changes. Your brain recognizes that you are resting. Under remote work, however, lunch often means walking to the kitchen and back. You eat at the same desk, the same chair, in front of the same screen alone, because last time I checked, children go to school, your wife goes to work in person. There's no guarantee that your wife will be at home working with you. So as a whole, you will be alone, impacting the loneliness as we perpetuate it so far once again. There's no environmental shift. There's no mental reset. Now, let's quickly recognize the harm of this always on mentality. When work lives inside your home, boundaries blur. Employees begin to check emails late at night, respond to messages after hours, extend working time slightly each day, and feel guilty for stepping away. This is the always on mentality. You are never fully working, but you are never fully resting either. That constant cognitive engagement prevents emotional recovery, and without recovery, burnout becomes inevitable, simply pushing for our side of the world that remote work is not a benefit to your mental health and instead works to diminish your mental health in the long term. Now, workplace interventions protect this boundary. When you leave the office, work expectations visibly reduce. That separation safeguards mental health and proves the ultimate superiority of workplace interventions. Now, let's weigh the two arguments that have been put forward so far. This debate is not about whether remote work can sometimes feel more comfortable. It's about which world is more effective at improving employee mental health at scale. At scale, you must account for vulnerable employees, unequal home environments, and structural inequality. On our side of the motion, as we've outlined, we preserve psychological boundaries. We prevent the always-on mentality. We institutionalize professional support. We reduce inequality in access to care, and we build resilience rather than assuming it. Now, Madam Speaker, mental health cannot be improved by collapsing all of life into one room. It improves through structure, boundaries, and professional support. Workplace interventions do more than relocate work. They build systems that protect employees' mental health. And for those reasons, I stand firmly against this motion. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. That was Abraham Ward, the second speaker from Campion College. At this point in time, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to dive into the second period of cross-examination. Once more, we invite the team in opposition to pose their questions first. And so, Team Campion, your questions, please.
Do you concede that interventions like ergonomic equipment and nutritious meals improve physical well-being and mental health are unlikely to be obtained under your side?
I'm sorry, you have to repeat, please.
Do you concede that interventions like ergonomic equipment and nutritious meals, which improve physical well-being and mental health, are unlikely to be obtained under your side?
No, we don't concede that because actually when you have like face-to-face work or requirements, the rigidity of it encourages you to like abide by the workplace requirements for nutrition. For example, if you have certain allergies, it's not guaranteed that the workplace will be able to accommodate for that. But if you're able to like operate autonomously, if you're in the workplace, you would have to go out of your way to like achieve like nutrition that is sufficient for your circumstances. But in our world, actually, you would be able to do that on your own time because you have the freedom, you have the flexibility, and you have the capacity to do so. You perhaps are able to like order food directly. Some workspaces don't allow individuals like directly source lunches if it's not from the organization itself. So there's heavy restrictions that occur under your world that aren't immediately present if you have the ability to work from home.
How do you deal with hidden discrimination under your side where managers feel less accountable due to being behind the screen?
Mind you, you do still have that same thing occurring under your side. And either way, HR is a thing that both sides can contend with. But in the workspace, it's a case where that has like large scale benefits or impacts on the person's mental health because this can show up as discrimination, this can show up as isolation, this can show up as like workplace dynamics and politics shifting in order to like isolate the individual in ways that are like structurally or like psychologically damaging. However, if you have the capacity, if this is like something that this person is experiencing, there is like a layer between the individual and the manager that decreases the psychological impact of this, in addition to the fact that we don't have the issue of maladaptive coping mechanisms on our side, so that individual does still maintain like avenues for like adjusting with this mentally or like feeling better about the situation.
Um, okay. Two-thirds of remote workers report experiencing loneliness. How would the people who experience depression, who have had a family member pass away, or someone going through divorce deal with the loneliness that comes with remote work under your side of the house?
Okay, repeat one more time for me, please.
Two-thirds of remote workers experience loneliness. How would the people who experience depression, who have had a family member pass away, or who are going through a divorce, deal with the loneliness that comes with remote work under your side of the house?
So the thing is, remote work does give these people like flexibility, and it gives them more time to adjust to certain things. And that time specifically, we told you, can be used to build actual social systems that like exist outside of the workforce. That then allows like greater comfort, more accessibility of that comfort, and that like particular social system, like that support system, like being more accessible for these individuals. If these individuals are depressed under your world, you're still unlikely to seek assistance or ramifications or like reach out on their own. And even if you want to make the argument that, well, managers can reach out for these people, there's still no real incentive or mechanization you've provided us to like confirm that they would then respond appropriately and like air their burdens and grievances to these strangers. On our side, however, you do have the ability to like actually build social relationships with individuals, like and invest in your like long-term relationships, which are like actively compromised because of like the rigid 9 to 5 structure.
All right, thank you very much. We now invite Team Knox College to pose their questions to Team Campion College.
Okay, so you said that there was an issue of transition decreasing like work-life balance, but aren't small implementable transitions just as like impactful in this, like having a specific location in your house dedicated for working? Because this has shown signs of significantly improving work-life balance in people who work from home.
Okay, so what you just presented to us is an ideal scenario where where everyone has a specific area where they can work. That's simply not the case. Many individuals, the beauty of the workplace is that many people come from different walks of life, and I promise you, this is not available to everyone. This ideal world that you've been presenting this entire time, where someone has desired space, the discipline to stop when they need to, is simply not realistic. And we believe that putting the onus on those individuals is unfair and unrealistic in this situation.
Also, there are structural mechanisms that encourage them to continue working. As we said before, they're more likely to be laid off. The managers aren't able to assess their actual working, so they're more likely to keep on continue working because they feel like that's what they have to do to remain in this job.
So you mentioned the issue of people like not clocking out on our side because of like that thing that you really just said. But this exists under your side as well, doesn't it? Because like you see work like emails spilling into like your day-to-day life. You see that this occurs like especially in, like teaching roles or like positions that have like high cost of labor or like just work particular jobs where like individuals feel like they need to continue working otherwise, whether or not they're in the physical space or not, it does still like end up in your like day-to-day life, regardless of whether they're in a physical location.
Okay, can you repeat that, please?
And I didn't hear
It's
a
like, don't
question
you
in
still
there
have
either.
content? Yeah, don't you still have it as like a prevalent issue that individuals are also not clocking out under your side because like emails are coming in from work or like they have to finish like this particular aspect of their work because they already developed like this rhetoric or this like discipline and like connection with their work because it is basically their life.
Okay, so as I was saying, like, okay, yes, while we do agree that this does exist, but it's further exacerbated on the your side of the world. As we said in my speech, our managers are not blind. They see that you have extra time and they take advantage of it. So this is only going to get worse. More emails are going to have to be coming in, the more that you're going to have to be responding to, and in the long run, you're going to have less time to interact with your family. So, well, while yes, these do agree on in both sides of the world, it's further an issue on your side.
Also, it's reduced on our side with the interventions because the managers become more aware that, like, oh, this worker could be suffering these conditions. The managers adjust schedule, they change like the workload that they apply to workers. That's the purpose of these interventions, to reduce the amount of work that the workers have to do and to ensure that it's mental, that it's like sustainable in the long run, right? That's the purpose of these interventions. You're still not encountering with the actual comparative in this debate.
Your third and final question, Knox College.
Okay. Do you agree to the fact that like maladaptive coping mechanisms are like more prevalent on the your side, due to the fact that these individuals like they're going to have like a stronger level of discipline and attachment to their work, and they won't have other mechanisms like or time for other mechanisms like alleviate this like emotional burden?
No, maladaptive coping mechanisms are obviously worse on the your side. When you're in a workplace, you're not allowed to drink alcohol. When you're in a workplace, you're not allowed to take drugs. These things are more likely to take place on the your side when you're at home and you have the freedom to take these maladaptive coping mechanisms. And these maladaptive coping mechanisms are really bad for your mental health in the long run because it takes you away from work. It like contributes to like the blurred boundaries between work and home life, and it overall contributes to like the long-term deterioration of your mental health. I don't understand why you still can't like process this point.
Okay. All right. A little bit spicy there at the end, but nevertheless, we want to thank both teams for this interesting debate so far. I see the tensions flaring, I see the joy of the sport coming through. All right, I think we need a 1 minute break to cool down just a little bit. Yes. And so we're going to invite both teams to take that 1 minute break and also to present your reply speeches, making sure that they are ready, they're accurate, that they are indeed proving why your side has won the debate. Yes, and most importantly, if there are any issues that remain in the debate uncontested and unsure of, to ensure that both teams do so. So that 1 minute break starts now. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are back. At this point in time, we invite the opposition reply speaker to take the stage. That is the final speaker from Campion College, Joshua Walcott.
Up goes first.
Indeed.
Oh. Okay. Before I get into my speech, let me address the cross-questioning section quickly. So we asked, like, with the ergonomic equipment and nutritious meals, we pointed out that those like serve your mental health, and those are unlikely to be obtained on their side. Their only response to this was that like you have the freedom to get food when you're under remote work and you're less likely to get allergies. This is like wrong for like several reasons. Firstly, like you can bring food home under remote work or the other side, right? This thing like isn't mutually exclusive to their side. Secondly, not everyone has nutritious food at home, and not everyone has the motivation to get nutritious food, right? So they're unlikely to get these things that we believe like assist, and they also believe assist in like the greater mental health. The chances are people are just going to be going to like the nearest fast food or like ordering in, right? And most people don't have the ability to buy ergonomic equipment. This is something that is standard place in offices. This is something that doesn't exist under like people don't generally buy those things for their home, right? So generally, what are we getting like from this just like basic cross-questioning? We're getting that under our side is the side that promotes more physical and mental well-being. The next cross-questioning was that like how would people, like we asked like how would people who experience depression or have a family member pass away or somebody going through a divorce deal with the loneliness that comes under remote work? Their only response to this, and the only response throughout the entire case, has been that like people would seek interaction throughout remote work. They provided no mechanism for this. They provided no substantiation for this. We already provided the mechanism that managers would reach out when they're made aware weekly that employees can experience mental health struggles. When they're shown that like this mental health problem exists, that's when they try to rectify it, right? So three things in the rest of the speech. Firstly, a summary of the debate. Secondly, an analysis of the main clashes. And third, a justification for why we won. So the first issue of this debate was which side prevents more serious forms of mental illness. They only had one thing under this, right? And their thing was that like people with these conditions have more time for like self-care. This is wrong for several reasons. I'll go into the first one. Firstly, we characterize remote work as fragile. So you're likely to be laid off. Your employer generally cannot see your value over remote work, and you're pushed to work even when your manager isn't there, right? So you're more likely to be dedicating more time into work, putting in like excessive hours at work without like somebody pushing you there because of the vulnerability of remote work. They had absolutely no reply to this. So what do you get under our side? Generally, you're going to be getting less burnout. You're going to be getting less stress. You're going to be getting less of this because they did not reply to this mechanization at all. The second thing is that people with severe mental health issues, people with depression, people with anxiety, people with these serious mental health issues don't have the motivation to seek out social interaction. The mechanism that we pointed out of managers being aware of this, of these group seminars allowing people to connect with these similar issues, this is much, much stronger, and they provided no similar mechanization under their side of the motion except for like self-care. This is probably the most important thing in this debate, and they had zero substantives on this. Okay, this issue in this debate was which side causes less stress. Under this, they said that like remote work offers more flexibility. So you have more time to sleep, you have more time to bond with like your families and friends, and you're able to cut out the time from commutes. We have three responses to this. Firstly, remote work blurs the boundaries between working and home. So as we already mentioned before, you have more flexibility, yes, but you're going to be using more of this time to work. Secondly, we pointed out information asymmetry. So workers feel constantly watched. They feel like they have to be on work 24/7 because like they have like different tools that are watching you as you work when you're doing remote work. This doesn't take place in person because like managers are more willing to trust you more. And as we pointed out before, the interventions will allow managers to be like more lax in regards to like you working or not. And secondly, we pointed out that you're more vulnerable to layoffs, so it causes more stress. The second thing that our substantive under this point was that like interventions create more healthy work-manager relationships. And I've already justified this throughout the rest of the speech. And the third thing, right, was which side provided more technical support for mental well-being. So they said that like remote work allows for flexibility, so you're allowed to like tend to your children, you're allowed to like make more time for your home recitals, and you're allowed more time to buy food. You have the same thing though when managers are more aware of mental health issues. Through altered schedules, like reduced workload, managers can facilitate this thing under our side. So at best, you get like it's a wash, but our side is actually better because you get nutritional foods, you get things like a yoga studio, you get things like bringing your dog to work and you being allowed to engage with your dog there. So the comparison is under remote work, you lack a boundary at home. You're constantly working, you're deprioritizing your self-care, which erodes your mental well-being. And the other comparison is like you engage in these negative coping mechanisms, and they didn't engage with it throughout the entirety of this debate. They simply asserted that our side is the side that has more coping mechanisms. As we responded in the cross-questioning and as we responded in our substantives, you're more likely to use negative coping mechanisms when you have the actual capacity to use those coping mechanisms, which is what you can do at home. So on their highest case, prop like on their highest case, props still lose because they didn't take the like wins with that opposition risk.
All right. Thank you very much. That was Joshua Walcott, the final speaker from Campion College. And now to conclude the debate for Knox College and to conclude the debate overall, we invite their final speaker, Summer Anderson.
Okay. 3, 2, 1. Mr. Speaker, we would have elucidated to you immediately what it is that causes mental health instability. We told you it was how much chronic stress a person experiences, how much time they have to recover from that stress, and how much control they have over their daily environment. So opposition would have actually neglected to contend with a majority of these within their arguments. We started by giving you the issues with intervention. We told you that they're shallow and they're general, and opposition justified this by stating generality applies with proportionality, that more people are able to receive these benefits. But we told you that's not the case with neurodivergent individuals. These individuals are not monolithic. Their issues tend to be nuanced, and they tend to have very specific needs, need to be met in very specific ways, and only they necessarily know the nuances or like the applications of. In a workplace, as much as you can contend for interventions as a means of like meeting these needs, this is actually not likely under their side, because we know that it's a case where generality, like the proportion, in the masses, so to speak, the neurotypicals would be the individuals who are mostly appealed to with these interventions, because you cannot necessarily spend like a large quantity of time appealing for the hyper-specific needs of one neurodivergent person in your workforce. So on our side, we see that these individuals actually get better security and better mental health stability because they're able to then appeal to and secure their own needs on their own time. Mr. Speaker, we told you about the issue with isolationism. Under their side, they contended with it by stating that we have more isolation. We have less people communicating with each other. We have less opportunities for people like to build relationships. Or we told you outright that this was false, because under their side, they have to resort to relationships in the workforce to like compensate for the lack of security or like the lack of social systems that the individuals are able to build outside of the work, because of like time in like consistently reducing like the ability of like people to like interact with their families, friends, and children. As a result of this, they have consistently had to harp on the idea that in the workforce you can communicate with your fellow peers, and this reduces isolationism. Actually, Mr. Speaker, we tell you that most people actually do have social systems. Most people do have social support systems that they have to neglect because of their work. Under our side, this is no longer the case. They have more time broadly, and opposition still has to contend with the fact that they have no mechanism to increase time available to these individuals. We told you additionally that they neglected to consider what actually makes relationships fulfilling. Under their side, relationships are shallow, or they're forced, and they do not satisfy the deep need for genuine, uncomplicated connections, because relationships in the workforce tend to be rife with like political nuances and like competition. Under our side, however, we see that people are better able to invest in their like private relationships with their families, friends, and children. This then builds support systems that these people are able to then use and leverage when they do have depression. The point of depression that they have, Mr. Speaker, the reason why people have depression, besides genetic vulnerabilities, happens to be the fact that they do not have the time to build adequate social systems. Managers, Mr. Speaker, do not care about you. They care about your productivity primarily. After that, Mr. Speaker, it is a case that in our world, we see that individuals who have families and friends that they have had to neglect for work have the ability to like build these relationships with them. That these individuals, their families and friends are able to like connect with them deeper. Additionally, on the point of work-life balance, there is a case where we told you almost it's a wash. Both sides we see that work is trickling over like after these individuals leave the workforce. But they would have justified the idea of like commuting being like a transition to work. After we told you very plainly that commuting has a large-scale economic and social and psychological damages on these individuals. It takes away from like wages that they would have spent otherwise on their mental health, their mental stability. Not only that, Mr. Speaker, but it actually takes hours of time away from them daily, time that could be used to do any other means of like productive things. And we tell you that this returning that time to them does substantial unmitigatable things for their mental health. Because as much as the question would like contend with the idea of like on our side we still see people like working from home because managers like are likely to utilize their time. It's the point that individuals in the systems do still have like a fixed amount of time that they're required to work for. And they do still have autonomy to choose whether or not they interact with the work provided by these managers after they have filled their quotas. They do still maintain quotas on both sides. Now, Mr. Speaker, we also told you that there is a neglect on the opposition side to consider the issues of economic unsustainability. Mr. Speaker, we told you that debt arises from consistent commuting practices. We told you that this causes instability and poverty. We told you that many people can't afford this, Mr. Speaker, and that leads to long-term mental instability that they have not contended with. To weigh both sides, Mr. Speaker, opposition largely posits this idea that interventions are sufficient enough to address the broad-scale issues within the workforce, despite the fact that most of these issues are generalized, most of these issues are nuanced, or most of these issues are these individuals can address them on their own time. We see that individuals do have an incentive to care about their own mental well-being. Individuals do want to decrease their own stress. Individuals do not necessarily want to be depressed. And on the our side, we see that if they're in a workforce where they have greater flexibility, they have greater control over their own time, and the resource of time is better allocated to them, then they're more likely on our side to choose to use that time to invest in higher quality needs of leisure and decreasing stress and mental depreciation and burnout, which is actually, I think, under their side that they have to consistently contend with. Because the principle we gave you was that they apply shallow solutions without addressing the root causes of rigid structural issues and workplace and commuting costs that these individuals have prevalently. And on that, Mr. Speaker, we are
And okay, there you go. Right on time, using every single minute, including that 15-second grace period. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, the judges have a lot of work to do. And so we're going to excuse ourselves to another space and return to you in a reasonable amount of time with the decision of this match.